Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League strikes a terrifying drum for the future of live service and the Destiny killers. 90% of games being released will be live service in some form, and if this is the trend, single-player developers swimming upstream into live service without a paddle, it's all but sunk for gaming. Suicide Squad is a unique case, however, and unlike Anthem, Suicide Squad didn't have the horror story in development that we know of. Before Suicide Squad's release, something was different from the legendary Rocksteady. They created the modern-day superhero game format, and gave Batman fans and superhero fans alike a place to call home. Given the track record of single-player games with a narrow, tight focus on a storyline true to the world's greatest detective, they couldn't let the bad game get away, right? Rocksteady spent several years on this project. They could not mess this up. Warner Brothers wanted the Suicide Squad to be the next great live service game. Well, you're about to learn about the modern-day tragedy of the next Destiny killer, the story of Suicide Squad, and the grim future of live service.
So, figure out who we're killing yet?
With the amount of hours that a live service game requires you to play, I figured the best place to look was with Outplayed. Outplayed is the best video capturing app for any game you'd like to save memorable times with. Hey. The app can even automatically capture your best moments so you can easily sort through them and share them with your friends or on socials. The main feature is the gameplay capture, which automatically records kills, headshots, and other key moments. But if there's some that you didn't want to keep, there's a video editor built in to splice the moments together. This is my favorite feature because it makes getting 8 hours of footage on a normal recording a lot easier to sort through, and I can edit a bunch of small clips instead of a massive amount. Now, let's get back to killing the Justice League. In 2024, my goal is to journey into variety on this channel and on my second channel. So if you guys haven't already subscribed or you've been considering it, please do so. Thank you. I'm going to make a bet here and assume most of you have at least heard of the game studio Rocksteady because they're legendary. Even if you haven't heard of them, I can guarantee you've heard of some of the games that they have created. Anyone who's even remotely a fan of superhero movies or superhero games has heard of Batman Arkham Asylum, Batman Arkham City, Arkham Origins, or Arkham Knight. These titans of the genre, no pun intended, are famous for being some of the greatest superhero video game adaptations ever made. Suffice to say, the vast majority of gamers have fond memories of everything that made these games so good, whether it's the fluid, exciting gameplay, the phenomenal atmosphere and voice acting, RIP Kevin Conroy, or the fact that these games are genuinely great adaptations of the Batman franchise. The critical and financial success of the Arkham games produced by Rocksteady has established them as one of the best studios in the industry. What's crazy to note then is that Arkham Asylum is their second game ever. That being said, it shouldn't be controversial to say that Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is not as good as these previous entries that Rocksteady made. And no, I'm not going to include Batman VR because VR games are fundamentally different. It's only been a few days since Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League has released, but it's already been getting mixed and poor reviews from major gaming news outlets. The main question we need to be asking right now is this: what went wrong during the game's development? Most people invested in the gaming industry, both customers and professionals, know that the development of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League has not been a happy one. There have been multiple delays since the game was announced in August of 2020, and it was only released 4 years later on February 2nd of 2024. Delays are never popular, but at the time some fans reluctantly accepted them because they were worried that Rocksteady would need more time to get this game right, especially in a market with a lot of looter shooter live service games that have failed. It's fair to say that when Rocksteady opted to move from making phenomenal melee-focused close-quarters combat games to making a third-person co-op looter shooter game, quite a few people were going to be confused with the direction they were taking. The logic of fans of the Arkham series was this: why fix what isn't broken? Nobody did fluid hand-to-hand combat the way that Rocksteady could when they made the games in the Arkham series. So, fans were already a little bit worried by Rocksteady's decision to make a looter shooter game, but they had other reasons to be a bit concerned by the direction that Rocksteady was taking. The decision to make Suicide Squad live service with content to come throughout the coming weeks and months, was an interesting one to say the least. But seeing as the trend in live service is to drop a base game with the promise of more to come, this may seem like a bad idea, but other games already have been doing this. If you think about it, it's not even like building a game. It's almost like building a platform to then add games on top of it. That's the idea of live service. But Rocksteady realistically has a cheat code for their game more than any other studio. They have all of DC's heroes and villains to play with. We don't have to create a new world like the other games did. I can understand selling DLCs or expansions like Phantom Liberty for Cyberpunk, but does this kind of game really need to be live service? It's kind of like releasing God of War, then informing your customers that you'll be releasing a new boss fight every month, while trying to sell as many skins and cosmetics as possible in the meantime. This also comes at a time when the vast majority of studios are involved in developing some kind of live service game. There are so many studios who made amazing single-player games that had their attempts to make multiplayer games go wrong. Just look at the recent Avengers game, look at Redfall, look at Anthem, which I recently covered on this channel. Live service games don't always result in success, but the fact that they can be monetized for months or even years after release makes them really attractive to studio executives. On February 2nd, a report came out from Griffin Gaming Partners and Rendered VC, which stated that 95% of studios are involved in making a live service game like Destiny 2 or Warframe. That's honestly crazy. Out of a sample size of 537, over 500 studios are all trying to cash in on the live service trend. This kind of bloat doesn't help anyone though. It doesn't help developers, it doesn't help studio executives, but most importantly, it doesn't help gamers like you or me. Kotaku reported that in 2023 alone, over 60 games were completely killed off. And it makes you wonder, what's going to happen if this wave of live service games fails to make money? Have we even seen a success on the level that they expect, like Destiny, in 10 whole years? In all honesty, I think the bottom line is this. If studios focused on live service games can invest as much as they can into developing them, consumers will grow increasingly tired of these sorts of projects. They will simply stop playing them. This will be disastrous for the industry when companies don't make any money on these kinds of projects, because we're just no longer interested in the glut of live service games that exist. There will be a massive wave of layoffs throughout the gaming industry. We'll see something like a stock market crash, with hundreds of people losing their jobs, all because virtually every single studio in the world is trying to cash in on live service bubble without understanding the why. And that is why I'm here, and why Suicide Squad failed. Hopefully with my experience of talking about Destiny killers and live service trends in general, analyzing what has made Destiny special over all these years, I can hopefully draw some sort of conclusion as to what these types of games need, especially Suicide Squad. Because this game is marred by live service elements within its gameplay. It's not the first case of a good studio to make a bad project because they wanted to make more money, but it is the first one of 2024, and potentially the most high profile. I'm just saying, this Kotaku quote pretty much sums up the game. Quote, "And for folks wanting something they can play for years, well, I hope you like shooting purple crystals over and over." So I sat down with Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, for my full review of this game. This section will be a review and analysis of Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, from the perspective of someone who has played both the Arkham games and someone who covers live service Destiny killers. I was not sponsored by Warner Brothers, as I was told by an anonymous source that yeah, you can imagine. I don't consider myself to be a ruthless critic that has to have everything my way, and I can try to understand the vision of development as best as my brain can, from not having a game design background. That being said, it doesn't take anyone in the space making games to see that this game wasn't great. It doesn't take a genius of the craft to see that live service is not understanding the fans of the genre. Destiny Killers is a genre I found myself trapped in, It's an entanglement of high highs and low lows, but there's usually something to appreciate in each, and I see most of these as experiments to build and learn from. That being said, I think Suicide Squad's appreciation comes from factors that you cannot engage in, like the animations, the voice acting, and some of the environmental presentation. I would argue that Suicide Squad was working within poor systems from the beginning, and these bled into every ounce of the game's hubris. It is unfortunately the poorest example of live service. I played every single Rocksteady Arkham game in the past. Batman is my favorite superhero after all, and these games are all fantastic in their own way, with Arkham City being my personal favorite in the series. There was a level of depth to the world, and every landmark in Arkham had some sort of sheen moment, where you knew eventually you'd be exploring the innards of the Joker's funhouse, the courtrooms, or the clock tower. I cannot say I remember a single landmark besides the Hall of Justice in Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. This is a pretty bad scenario when you consider that most people are aware of Superman, Metropolis, hell, any of the Justice League at all, and I believe this was all founded in the early stages. You have to think that movement was a big part of Suicide Squad, and to traverse with 4 and more coming characters, you'd need to design a world that is pretty open. Each member of the Suicide Squad has a unique movement, and a lot of people call this the best part of the game. Hell, I would argue this is something most live service games get wrong. The core movement and gameplay loops to keep you both engaged and wanting to master this. A big part of what I call the why in live service especially. Why get invested to play 100 hours if there's nothing marrying you to the core loop of the game? Improvement is key, and I went into Suicide Squad thinking movement was going to be a large part of improvement, the way Anthem's flying had learning curves to master it. King Shark plunges and lunges, Captain Boomerang zips at flash speed, Deadshot anthems through the air, and Harley Quinn. Movement had won me over in the beginning because I figured there was a lot of eventual progress to upgrade this. But this movement from the beginning is the exact same by the end. For comparison's sake of rewarding progression, Destiny didn't even start the player with an extra jump. And for single player games, Batman gave the player about a quarter of the movement kit arsenal to begin with. This is a major issue for the Suicide Squad, as Metropolis is massive and very much demands that you stay above the ground, so adding even more movement could break the game. But without progression in the movement, it becomes flat over time. You may have seen comparisons of the world in Metropolis versus the Arkham one, and I think these are flawed arguments when the world was just made for the core of a mistreated early vision. I can see why everyone was annoyed when Arkham came out almost a decade ago to look that beautiful, and it's easy to have a visceral reaction to Metropolis. What I can tell you from covering a lot of these live service games is that these environments are usually dumbed down to complement online servers and the density of enemies at the core of the looter-shooter loop. That's not to say that Metropolis looks great, it just looks fine. But in Batman, you're almost incentivized to explore the landmarks. In Suicide Squad, you are told to get to every rooftop possible and fight mindless enemies with no depth of mechanics in combat. Just as the why is missing from movement and results in the world feeling the same, the combat is miles away from the why. Combat boils down to shooting, timing a reload, stunning an enemy with your gun, and gaining shields on melee hits, with grenades as a backup option. That's right, there is little to no melee or DC character combat. It's mostly shooting and with no depth to that either. Think about a third-person shooter that demands potentially hundreds of hours, where every single gun sounds and acts very much the same. This progression of gunplay missing results in activities that ultimately turn flat, and loot that isn't rewarding. Most missions involve activities that are akin to public events in Destiny. Defend an area, bank motes into a car, bank motes into a tower, defend an area, capture people into Pokeballs, so on and so none. None of these really tell you to traverse through any obstacles. There's no time trials, there's no depth. It is just a letdown here. On top of that, for completing missions early on, you will get some of the best possible weapons, which never tell you to upgrade your loot throughout your playthrough. It is shocking. So core-wise, this game went from tolerable to a complete chore by the end, because I was the exact same power at the beginning as I was at the end, which is incredibly grim when you consider that Rocksteady has probably built the whole game around these elements first, missing the why completely. It's not like Destiny had an issue with movement, guns, and abilities. It was more on the story and some grind. Suicide Squad has the opposite problem, and that is much harder to fix. Before I get ahead of myself, let's talk about the story and an analysis of the experience. In the first few hours, I saw the vision for what Suicide Squad originally was, before it shifted to live service at least. The game starts out with an intro tutorial that I think does a great job of teaching you everything you will need to know about the game and the characters. You're traversing through what looks like a destroyed city, making you wonder what led to this. It is assumed that our characters already know each other too, so the Suicide Squad game might already assume that you know the movies and world, which isn't a bad assumption since I can't think of many people who don't, and this could be a more focused tale of the Justice League. You're zapped by a laser to a 7 days earlier title card. This game makes it very clear that we are in the Arkham universe, and that takes some balls, because that world has 4 games that have expanded it. We see the classic Suicide Squad rule while Savathun gives us a speech on how she has the power to kill them whenever. The characters fight, title cards come about, and jokes that will land for some of you and not for all of you.
What's a fish doing in Arkham? You got mental health issues, Shark?
Generalized anxiety.
You might think that this is looking closer to a movie game that you'd find in the mid-2000s so far, and I think had Suicide Squad been this narrative-focused, linear game with a cast of heroes and villains playing off of the Suicide Squad, the story could have been okay. Not great, but a reason to play it out. Our first task is to explore the Hall of Justice and take a piece of equipment each from the Justice League's wares to help on your journey. Captain Boomerang takes a boomerang, Harley Quinn takes a bat glider, Deadshot takes a jetpack, and King Shark takes the Riddler's hat of invisibility.
The Riddler's hat of invisibility!
Where'd the shark go?
Children.
As the story progresses, you're carried through the air by a possessed Green Lantern. Brainiac is the villain of the story, and if you're curious when you will see Brainiac, you will have to wait 10 hours. That's right, 10 hours before you even see the villain of the game. Plus, where is the rest of the Justice League? Don't you think this would be a pretty big issue to them? Why was the Suicide Squad called up? I can't recall a single time this is brought up in the story at all, but I guess Warner Brothers wants a reason to introduce them in the DLC. I am just as confused as you are. We then meet each of the Justice League, starting with the Flash, who is trying to break free from Green Lantern's binds, and this is a pretty great sequence. It almost feels like the Suicide Squad work better as side characters helping the non-possessed Justice League members. But then all of the jokes do boil down to the same monotonous joke about the incompetence of the Suicide Squad. And yeah, you've probably seen this before. Flash gets hurt in the fight with Lantern, and you need to carry him back to HQ, when all of a sudden, motherfucking Batman comes for vengeance. And if you thought this might not have been Arkham Batman before, I hate to break it to you. There is a whole museum of Arkham Batman history used as a horror section. Batman's introduction is fantastic, as he uses all of the Arkham vents and floor traps to knock you out one by one, before taking Flash to Brainiac. Boomerang, for some reason, had to cut off one of Flash's fingers, so now you have access to the Hall of Heroes base, and it's here where you meet Wonder Woman, who is not possessed. You might be wondering where Superman is, and just like Brainiac, you will not see him for majority of the game. At this point, I was really enjoying the story. I thought it could evolve into something pretty great, but this was the best part of the entire game, full stop. Along the way, you need to assemble your anti-Justice League with Gizmo, Penguin, Little Girl Poison Ivy, and Toyman. Some people were annoyed that Poison Ivy was a girl, but in Arkham Knight, she died as a lady, and now she's brought back, and this is how she's brought back, so I thought it was fine. But the side characters not being plot points and instead just vendors was also really frustrating. After gathering our crew and getting laughed at by Evil Flash, the game plunges off a cliff in quality. I definitely enjoy playing it. I don't think I love it, but I don't think I hate it either. I think there's a world of potential for this game. How do I actually get out of this game? Evil, I'm so confused. What? Alright, new recording. I am being serious, and I hope this doesn't come off like a complete dickhead thing to say, but I got so tired playing this game for this video that I actually fell asleep. Wow. I don't know what did it, but I fell asleep.
To the hall's cloaking.
And I hope that's not something that is hyperbole or overbloviated or anything like that, but I just fell asleep playing this game. The loop became so focused on the same 3 objectives to the point that even the boss fight against the Flash, with great build-ups to the boss in cutscenes, was lame. It was the same stun mechanic that had been taught early on, and every death was the same. None of the Justice League were represented well besides maybe the Flash, and there is only one compelling moment that would make sense for these characters, and that's when Wonder Woman uses the lasso of truth on Flash.
You have to kill us, Diana. We have to die to save the world.
Then, this happens.
Killing your first Justice League asshole perks you right up. Hey, Waller, you're gonna want to fill us in right now.
Our trackers for Lex Luthor?
Not getting shit done up here, and we're exposed.
Anyone got a better idea than following a dead guy's heartbeat?
I do not.
Sure! Let's find dead Lex in dead Metropolis! Ha! What could go wrong?
It's just a forced way to introduce the multiverse to the game, and you've seen the multiverse done 100 times by now, so it won't hit the same level it did maybe 5 years ago. When you briefly enter an alternate universe where Luthor has hair, which killed any sort of stakes for the game. If Luthor had just died for us to bring him back in 2 missions, who's to say that all of the heroes and villains can't just return? And it made the one jaw-drop moment of the story, with Luthor's heart being ripped out, lose all value. It also made any death of the Justice League lose weight too, since the easiest thing to do is to grab another version of them from another universe. The mission for Lex is to escort Luthor's truck, to then get sent back to the normal world in just 1 mission. That's right, a whole plotline and major conflict and potential character arc for all of the Suicide Squad is over in 1 mission. The biggest issue with this story is that we never see how the Justice League was taken by Brainiac in general. You'd think that Rocksteady would do us that courtesy at least when the world's greatest detective is Brainiac's right-hand man. Wouldn't evil Batman pretend to be fixed and then trap us? Wouldn't there be any creativity in the delivery of this? Batman constantly tells the other members of the Justice League who are possessed to not underestimate us. Yet we get a free pass to fight the Justice League 1 by 1. When you kill the Justice League, there is no grand stage of the Suicide Squad even working together. It's just mow them down and they fall over, leading to the next story beat. Not even a hold or sorrow moment for us killing them. This might have been a creative choice by Rocksteady to play into the humor of the Suicide Squad, but it doesn't work at all. There is some other side missions like Riddler's trophies, but they're just not as good in quality as the Batman Arkham Riddler trophies, so I didn't really engage in this. At one point, I was wondering if the Suicide Squad would ever become a whole interactable team while you fight, evolving character progression through gameplay and boss fights. I played solo and forgot that this was a co-op shooter, so that just wouldn't be possible. It boiled down to playing as King Shark since his movement was most consistent for me, and mowing everyone down with a minigun, and not King Shark's teeth or hands or really anything that make him King Shark. The only point I can make here is that by not including melee as a huge element in the game, it made gunfights as cluttered as the UI itself. I was constantly being hit by enemies miles away from me, and it dragged on more than it should have. I wanted to get the satisfying feeling of movement again, but it led nowhere. I wanted the gunplay to evolve as my skill tree opened up, but it just didn't make a lick of difference. In the parallel universe of this game not being a live service, always online game, I think being able to swap between the Suicide Squad members mid-mission and having them interact with each other in combat could have been great, but when you play as any of them, the others almost disappear. The ways to kill the Justice League also felt really uninspired. You're telling me that Flash is killed by a grenade attachment he has defeated before? Green Lantern dies to Yellow Lantern powers, which he has defeated before? Batman? Oh, we'll get to Batman. The Green Lantern fight felt the most out of place. This could have been removed from the story and nothing would change, as Lantern doesn't even establish stakes that Flash did by killing our world's Luthor. He's just an obstacle to Batman and Superman. Green Lantern's fight is a bit better than the Flash though, needing us to use Yellow Lantern infused ammo to destroy the Green Lantern missiles, helicopters, and more. It's just more shooting really, but it was at least a little bit more engaging. By the end, this happens.
What?
Now, I'm not a Green Lantern know-it-all, but I do know that this is a forced plot device so that we could have a cool reveal of Superman. But I think all it did was make people question why more fingers are getting chopped off, and completely lose the Superman reveal moment for a question as to how King Shark could wield the ring. The ring is thrown into the ocean by the end, and we will never see this again. Yet Brainiac is somehow able to make Green Lantern helicopters appear. Great stuff, guys. Superman throws a nuke at the city. Wonder Woman tries to stop him, and eventually, she just gets straight up murdered. So the plan then becomes to find the Batcave, the most hidden lair for a superhero out there, and you find it in 2 missions. Once in the Batcave, the plan for the Justice League is to purposely get affected by Batman's Scarecrow toxin, but so much so that they can then fight back? This section made me question everything I had played. Sure, it was cool to be in the Batcave and get ambushed by some trademark moves of the Arkham series, but we've seen this done better in the first mission. This is where I start to consider if the Justice League outside of a couple of members would have been better off becoming raid bosses like Destiny's raids. Imagine storming the Batcave, solving puzzles that only Batman could have set up, fighting bosses, etc. Instead, Batman became a giant boss bullet shield that felt so out of character for him. At this point, Rocksteady proved to me that there was nothing left to excite me in this game, and I was fully checked out. I wanted to finish the game so I could bring you guys this video, so I carried on after my nap. So you kidnap Batman to... yeah, do you even care anymore? Batman gets taken by Lex Luthor and we get the Super Kryptonite. But right before Superman's fight and on a random park bench, this happens.
Are we done with your bad stand-up routine?
Almost. But you always gotta end on your best joke.
This is the one recording of the campaign that ended up being corrupted for me, but suffice to say, there was not a single emotion. just pure apathy at this point in the story. I want you to consider that we still haven't seen Brainiac at this point, the villain so smart and cunning that he corrupted the main Justice League heroes, and the endgame also has no clear objective yet. Other live service games at this point at least tease some sort of endgame activity through small strike-level activities, side missions that led to great loot, some sort of unique escape from the main game. But Suicide Squad just doesn't have one. That's the thing. This game has public events in everything. There is no diversification of content. It is all the same. But before I get ahead of myself, we need to look at the Superman fight. A hero that is so misunderstood by current media that it hurts. Every story of Superman turns him into the villain because he's very powerful. But Superman might be the most down-to-earth human I have ever seen represented in comics. And I want to one day see this done right. Lex Luthor has no real part of this fight either. Sure, he helps you get the super kryptonite, but you'd think the main villains of these heroes would have a chance to shine as heroes. I think the Suicide Squad, again, works best when they're assisting and not taking center stage, like we saw with The Flash and partially Wonder Woman. But the story doesn't want to evolve this. It wants to get to the non-existent endgame. By the end of Superman's horrid death, we are partially kidnapped by Brainiac, then to be rescued immediately. I feel like the Justice League could have also broken free if it was this easy. Wouldn't any of them have thought ahead? We then have a final storm on Brainiac with different levels of difficulty completing the same mundane tasks you have seen before in a harder environment. Each of these fights that you can choose from are the boss fights from before, but with Brainiac instead. And I wanted out of this game. I chose the Flash 2.0 fight, and yeah, it was a little bit harder, but it was just overall the same. And by the end, I had some words for this game. I mean, that's the end of the game. Story completed. Oh, it's over. This was tough to get through already. Oh my god. I started off with this game being, oh, I actually like this. I don't know what people are talking about, to dreading my time by the end. What was really great was the homage to Kevin Conroy at the end. You could tell that even with a weak game, he enjoyed his time voice acting, and Rocksteady held Mr. Conroy in high regard. I've even seen some discourse about how this was his last and that it was a shame that they made him do this, but I think that's disrespectful and that's not the case. The voice acting performance was great as always, and I don't think he would have agreed to the role if he thought it wouldn't be a fun time for him. There's even been rumors that Batman and the Justice League as a whole are actually not dead, so we'll have to see with time. But now it's time that we wrap it up for the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. So what is this game missing to become a truly great live service game? What can it do to save itself? For Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, I believe the best way to save this game is to restart from the beginning. See, I usually have something nice to say about the gameplay, but I was truly bored about 30% of the way in. And this is because when you take away the cutscenes and jumping around the map for the first time, you're left with a mindless shoot-a-thon. There's never the feeling of overcoming odds, learning the ins and outs. The skill trees don't even really help. The weapons all felt the same. The game is purely boring. And the entire world was built around a game that never understood what it wanted to be. The why is missing. And this game, much like almost every other live service game, is reactionary and not innovative. Reacting to a list of features it needs, without understanding that the best games all came from a place of pure inspiration and innovation. From the get-go, Suicide Squad might have been a story-first type of game, as we see in the first 2 hours. But as development went on, it's clear to me that this game didn't have any excitement. It might not have been ready, and there may be a 2.0 world, but I'm just so sick of this type of live service game. And this is purely speculation here, so take this with a grain of salt. Maybe they saw what Destiny had done and what others had done that have been successful and wanted to blaze their own paths so hard that they ignored key components that make those games work so well. There is a whole list of features, but not one right ingredient in the gameplay. I'm sorry if you're watching this as someone who works on games, and or works at Rocksteady, but this game missed on almost every level. The why is an equation that games have been trying to solve for 10 years after Destiny's release. But as we've seen with Anthem and many other live service games, a lot of them misunderstand what made Destiny special to begin with. Maybe it's not a simple game of math. The why is a story of passion, it's smooth gameplay, and it understands the depth of progression. It's the activities that make you beg for more. It's the loot that allows for the player to make their characters based around it. It's not Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, at least our universe's version of it. And I'm sorry to say that this game is the ultimate example of live service gone wrong. Suicide Squad to kill the industry. Thank you for watching this video. Consider supporting my Patreon and my journey into live service and Destiny killers. I will see you guys in the next one.